Namaskaram. My name is Pramod Kumar. I am working as an assistant professor at the Amrita International Center for Spiritual Studies at Amrita Vidyapeetham in Coimbatore. And I am very happy to be part of this important initiative to spread the teachings of Swami Vivekananda as we celebrate the 125th anniversary of his triumphant return to India. So let me share my own personal experience to start with of how Swamiji came into my life and Swamiji's teachings came into my life. You would have read in our Puranas, there is this great rishi called Narada. So if you read our Puranas, you will find a very interesting thing about Narada is that he comes into your life at a very critical turning point when there is a sadhaka, when there is a seeker of truth who's searching for spiritual knowledge. And there is a great turning point about to happen in his life. You will find that in all our Puranic stories, Narada usually appears at such an important juncture, at a turning point, and gives the spiritual knowledge or the impetus required, the motivation required for that seeker to attain his spiritual goals. So you would have seen in the story of Dhruva, for example, that Narada motivates him to perform tapas to attain his goals. Or in the case of Prahlada, it is Narada who saves Prahlada's life. When he was in his mother's womb and Indra attacks her, it is Narada who saves Prahlada. And without Prahlada, Hiranyakashipu would not have been defeated. So this beautiful thing that you find about Swamiji, Swami Vivekananda, is that he often comes into our lives at such critical turning points. And it is not only with me, but you will see many such stories of millions of people across the world, who were searching for something, and coincidentally or accidentally they come across a book of Swami Vivekananda, a video maybe of Swami Vivekananda, or some teaching which becomes a great awakening for them, a spiritual awakening for them, which brings about a great transformation in their personal and spiritual lives. So something like that, something similar happened to me also when I was a student at IIT Madras, Chennai. I was doing my BTech in mechanical engineering there between 96 and 2000. This was the first time that I was living in a hostel, and there were so many pressures that were acting on me. One was for the first time staying away from the family. Second was the hostel life. Third was the academic stress. And this was the first time that as an adolescent kid, I was searching for my own identity. For many years, those samskaras perhaps which were there in my mind, which had been suppressed, because the society around you does not give you the freedom or the independence to inquire into spiritual topics when you are in a young age. Your family will tell you that this is not the time, you should read for your exams, you should study and get a degree, get a job and settle down. And therefore, when you're, in a very protected kind of an atmosphere, you cannot have your own independent inquiry. So when you're staying away from the family, that freedom is a boon and a curse. It depends on how you use it. And it kind of, fueled the inner search for me, the search for life's meaning, which I was looking at. And one day, I went and participated in an event that was organized by a linguistic group in IIT Madras called the Marathi Mandal. And they gave me a small book of Swami Vivekananda, which is called Vivekananda, His Call to the Nation. It's a small booklet, a compilation of his life and teachings, which continues to inspire, as I said, millions of people across the world. Many people will tell you that this was perhaps the first book that they read of Swamiji. And this is how Swamiji came into their lives, and this is how they started reading the complete works of Swami Vivekananda. So it was a chance encounter, and this is what you find about Swamiji's teachings, his works, his personality, is that even a chance encounter with him is enough to transform you, to completely reshape your life and to give it a positive spiritual direction. So that book kind of opened up a whole new world of Indian spirituality and religion and philosophy for me. And many of those, answers that I was searching for, where, I was not able to find satisfactory answers to those questions that I was searching for, I began to find in the teachings and in the works of Swami Vivekananda. You would have heard about how Anna Hazare also speaks about this, that there was a phase in Anna Hazare's life when he was going through a lot of depression, and he had almost become suicidal, and he goes to the Delhi railway station, if I remember correctly, to kill himself by lying down on the railway tracks, and he chances upon a small book of Swami Vivekananda on a platform bookstall, and he begins to read it, and from there he says his life was completely transformed. Often Anna Hazare quotes the letter that Swamiji writes to the Maharaja of Mysore, where he says, "My dear prince, this life is short, the vanities of the world are transient. They alone live who live for others, the rest are more dead than alive." A very beautiful exhortation of Swami Vivekananda, that your life becomes fruitful and meaningful only when you lead your life in the service of others and not merely for self-gratification. So in many interviews you will see that Anna Hazare quotes this teaching of Swami Vivekananda, and he says that it is this that inspired him to dedicate his life to the service of his people. He goes back to his village in Maharashtra at Ralagaon city, and from being a depressed, suicidal youth, he went on to become what he has become, a legend in India's struggle against corruption, in bringing about reforms in our public life, etc. So this is the power of Swamiji's teachings, that as time passes, instead of fading away, you find that Swamiji's personality and his teachings are becoming more and more important, more and more influential, continue to touch the lives of many people in our society and across the world. People continue to find inspiration, direction, and solace in their personal lives, in their spiritual journey, in their spiritual search, and in many other ways by reading the life and works of Swami Vivekananda. So this this experience at IIT brought me into contact with a band of young students, postgraduate students who were senior to me, and who were running an informal Sunday meeting group called the Vivekananda Study Circle. Years ago, there was a previous director of IIT Chennai called Dr. NVC Swami, who had initiated with this very beautiful idea of a Vivekananda study circle there at IIT Chennai, where he used to give lectures regularly, on a weekly basis, on Swami Vivekananda's life and his works. After he retired as the director, that study circle kind of became a little dormant, and these students were kind of continuing their meetings in an informal way in the hostels. And I happened to come into contact with them, and I became instrumental in reviving this Vivekananda study circle at IIT Madras. And looking back on my student days, at my days in IIT Madras, I think this was one of the most enriching and fulfilling kind of experiences that I've had at the IIT, was that I was part of this group of students who were able to take Swamiji's teachings to the whole community of students there at IIT Chennai. And that was in 1998, and I'm happy to tell you that to this day, today it's 2022, this Vivekananda Study Circle continues there, that it has survived. It has become an integral part of IIT Chennai's student activities, and it has had a very positive, vibrant impact on the student community there, to such an extent that many of the professors, and I remember even one of the former directors called us to tell us. There was a phase when there were a lot of suicides, for example, happening at IIT Chennai, students committing suicide because of academic stress. And these guided meditation sessions which the Vivekananda Study Circle was conducting on Sundays, where we would invite a Swamiji from the Ramakrishna mission, usually the editor of the Vedanta Kesari at the Mylapore Mutt, to conduct this Vivekananda Study Circle on Sundays and conduct that guided meditation. Many people acknowledged that many students were attracted to these guided meditation sessions, driven of course by academic stress, that it helped them to cope with the academic stress. And in a way, it also brought them into contact with their spiritual roots. This is how the Vivekananda Study Circle at IIT Chennai has continued to inspire many generations of students there to discover, the life and teachings of Swami Vivekananda. So, during these 4 years, we were reading mainly the lectures from Colombo to Almora and letters of Swami Vivekananda. And as we were reading these works of Swamiji, we began to think, in many of the places, Swamiji is touching upon so many facets of Indian civilization and Indian society. He's not just talking about Vedanta, he's not only talking about spirituality or philosophy. In many places, for example, he deals with historical issues like the Aryan invasion theory. He deals with social issues, social problems that India is facing. He touches upon education, he touches upon politics, almost every topic under the sun that concerns every Indian, he is touched upon it in these works. And sometimes I used to wonder, why is Swamiji talking about all these things? Being a monk, why is he not talking only about spirituality? And why is it that, he's talking about the Aryan invasion theory, and he's talking about history, he's talking about sociology, he's talking about politics, and he's talking about so many other things. So in trying to understand why Swamiji was, saying all these things, we started inviting some experts from outside IIT Madras to come and talk to us about all these issues that Swamiji is touching upon. We called some historians to talk about the Aryan invasion theory. We called people to talk about Swamiji's vision of education, of economy, of politics, etc. And this is how our understanding of the gigantic vision, the infinite vision that Swamiji had for India and for all Indians and for the future of India. Drop by drop, little by little, we started soaking in that grand, vision that Swamiji had for India. Right? In 4 years, we were able to pick up a little of that fire that Swamiji was, that spark that Swamiji was. And this is how, in fact, our love for our civilization, my love for India deepened because of reading Swamiji. Swamiji was, if you look at what stands out in Swamiji is that fiery sense of belonging to India, that fiery sense of love that he had for his country, for his civilization, for his culture and spirituality. So this idea stands out that there is something precious in India, the spiritual knowledge in India deserves to be protected, deserves to be preserved, and deserves to be passed on to the future generations. And Swamiji was, dedicating his whole life, literally, to ensure that this knowledge is not lost to posterity. And, therefore, this sense of responsibility, so to say, this idea came to me that, we should all contribute something in this direction also. And from there, from being a mechanical engineering graduate to what I have become today. Today, I teach a course on Indian culture and spirituality to all the undergraduate students of Amrita University in Coimbatore. It has been an adventurous journey, and this inspiration, was provided by Swami Vivekananda. And I find it very satisfying that I am doing this today, that, I am instrumental in what Swamiji wanted every Indian to do when he says that he is the greatest benefactor of India, who brings the knowledge of India's past to the doorstep of every Indian. That I have become instrumental in doing this to students is thanks to the inspiration that Swamiji has provided to me in my life. To conclude, I would say that as we celebrate this 125th anniversary, it is very important that youngsters, you should read the life and works of Swamiji. So 3 books that I would like to recommend to you as far as the life of Swamiji is concerned. Perhaps the most beautiful, biography or memoirs of Swamiji that I have read is Sister Nivedita's Master as I Saw Him. The way she brings out Swamiji's personality, various aspects of Swamiji's personality, in very beautiful language, very rich language that Sister Nivedita is known to write in. If you can read it, it is simple to understand, but very, very beautiful and very, very deep. This would be a very good introduction to you. Of course, if you can read a more elaborate version of his life, which is Swami Vivekananda's life by his Eastern and Western disciples, that's an extraordinary book with so much of detail of Swamiji's life, his travels. Every detail has been captured in that book. So if you can read that, well and good. But if you want a shorter version, an introduction to Swamiji's life, Then Sister Nivedita's Master as I Saw Him, I would definitely recommend. Second is a book called Talks with Swami Vivekananda, where his conversations with some of his disciples, particularly I think Sharat Chandra Chatterjee, have been recorded, where again, he touches upon various aspects of India, and very fiery talks, sometimes very inspiring talks with loads of nuggets of wisdom and inspiration that he provides. And of course, lectures from Colombo to Almora, which nobody can miss. Letters of Swami Vivekananda. These are all very easy to read, and this should be a starting point if you're a beginner. If you're picking up Swami Vivekananda's life or teachings, these are some of the books that I would recommend. And I do hope that all of you will discover yourself, that you will discover India through the eyes of Swami Vivekananda in this 125th anniversary, as I did, and as millions of Indians and millions of people across the world continue to do, taking inspiration from Swami Vivekananda's life. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to share my experiences with you. Namaskar.